So this is a question from Craig, who says...
Hello, Craig.
Has the recent turmoil and churn with multiple prime ministers in quick succession given the UK an appetite for frequent change? And could that manifest itself as restricting a Labour government to a single term only?
No, I think is the answer. I think people are sick of frequent churn. They want stability. They want the chaos of the past 5 years to stop. I think, in effect, I think you'll see the opposite. Yeah, that's it. I mean, what do you think, Rachel?
I think our perception of what a short-serving or long-serving Prime Minister has changed dramatically. Like, when I was sort of growing up, John Major was seen as quite a short-serving Prime Minister, and obviously he served for 7 years. And after sort of the last 5 years, where we've had a year here, a couple of years there, 6 weeks in the sense of Liz Truss, I think that level of churn is kind of unprecedented and unexpected.
People are sick of referendums. They're sick of by-elections, the discussion. Brexit was the big thing that brought about this sort of voter fatigue, I think. And I think once Labour get in, if they do get in, they'll be able to sort of rely or lean on that requirement or that desire for some normality.
I went back and looked at when the last Prime Minister was who was both voted into office for the first time in a general election and voted out of office in a general election, to both kind of come in and leave. And I had to go all the way back to Edward Heath in the 70s. Actually, that seems to be, we think of it as the norm that somebody comes in an election and gets voted out, but it really hasn't been for much of the last kind of 50, 70 years. But even so, that level of churn is unexpected. And as you say, every time you get a new Prime Minister, they have a new cabinet, and then you've got all their junior ministers, and then you've got all their spads, and just the cost, both in money and in time wasted working out what this new administration is going to do. Like, that's partly one of the reasons why fundamental problems don't get solved, right?
Yeah, and I think also, going back to what Freddie was saying, I think when people are seeing the NHS crumble and their children's schools crumble and trains aren't working and everything's more expensive than it was and they can't afford things that they used to, I mean, the country seems to be getting worse to many people. This sort of self-indulgent infighting, changing leaders, backstabbing, all that, it does feel to a lot of people like, how could they do this when so many longer-term structural problems need fixing? And I think I totally agree with both of you. I don't think people want more political instability. I don't think people want to see more leaders. I think they want security, and I think they want a leader who can give that. And I think the biggest test for whether Labour will have a second term is how well they deal with those underlying structural issues, those underlying problems. So whether people can actually feel with a Labour government like the NHS is in safe hands, like things are getting cheaper, like their children's futures are safer. And I think that will be the biggest test of whether Labour get a second term, not whether people get bored of Keir Starmer.
Yeah, and it'll help them because they can basically say that we need another term, we need to revert to a longer term focus on politics. I mean, and we hate the phrase, and we've discussed it. Well, I hate the phrase anyway, and we've discussed it before. But Starmer's sticking plaster politics is about identifying people's malaise with Westminster politics and the fact or the perception that it's so short term. So it all plays into what Labour are doing at the moment and what they're saying.
The other thing to consider is that the Conservatives and Labour have very different ways of removing and reappointing leaders. So 3 of the Conservative Prime Ministers, Theresa May, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, were removed by the Parliamentary Party, and the Conservative Party historically is quite good at acting when they feel like they need to. Labour is less good at removing leaders, or you could say it has a more democratic approach going to the membership, and that process is different. So I think you are unlikely to have Keir Starmer ousted mid-term in the way that Theresa May and Boris Johnson and Liz Truss were, which obviously is going to impact the sense of stability you get from that Labour government?
I think so, particularly because the leader's office, Starmer's office, is such a tight grip on the parliamentary party. You're not going to get the same thing you had with Jeremy Corbyn when he came in, when you had Labour MPs, in effect, ensure that there was a leadership challenge from Owen Smith.
But even then, they couldn't get rid of him,
because the membership re-elected Jeremy Corbyn. Exactly. So then Jeremy Corbyn was leader for a long time. I mean, as you say, Rachel, that wouldn't have happened in the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party are extremely effective, increasingly reticent, but extremely effective at getting rid of leaders when they need to. I think they feel now that they've got rid of so many prime ministers in the past few years that they're going to hold off for a bit. But in the past, I mean, as we discussed earlier, I mean, they've been extremely good at it. Keir Starmer is going to be able to keep going. You're not going to see a leadership election, I don't think, with the membership involved for a very long time. But just going back to what you were saying, Zoe, about whether you're still going to get that backstabbing, gossip, Westminster intrigue, I think you're still going to get that. You're going to get that regardless. I mean, look at the new Labour years. Tony Blair was extremely secure as a leader. You still had all the reshuffle gossip and the Westminster debates every single week. That's never going to go away. That's much more of a symptom of our media landscape and the fact that we're also focused on Westminster. But it doesn't mean that the fundamentals of politics are going to be short term.
Thanks so much for watching. We'd love to know what you think. Please make sure you leave your comments below. And if you enjoyed watching this podcast, you can watch more of our videos on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to like and subscribe.